In this screencast, we will be discussing epithelial tissues. We will talk about the characteristics along with the different types of epithelial tissues and how each type has a different structure and function. And we will learn about the different diseases associated with these tissues. First, we need to know what a tissue is. A tissue is composed of groups of cells that are similar in structure and function. Although we will explore the different type of epithelial cells, we will also learn the general characteristics that all of them have in common that make them different from the other tissues in the human body, which are connective, muscle, and nervous fibers. A term that many healthcare students should be aware of is histology, which refers to the study of tissues. So as you know, in this screencast, we will be studying the histology of epithelial cells and tissues. So pretty much, epithelial tissues are located all over the body, but to be specific, they are mostly located covering body surfaces and organs, forming the inner linings of body cavities, lining hollow organs, and composing glands, which is performed by one of the more specialized epithelial cells called glandular epithelium, which aids in hormone secretion. Tissues are very crucial structures because they perform many functions in the body. The epithelial tissue protects the underlying tissue and organs, so it is very important to maintain its protective functions. It acts as a filter, so it helps get rid of harmful microorganisms and particles like dust. It also protects the body from injury to major organs, not only from an external force, but internally because it prevents organs from rubbing against each other. As I mentioned before, certain epithelial cells have some secretory functions in the body, releasing hormones, enzymes, and lubricating fluids in the glands. The tissue also has some absorptive properties in the intestines by absorbing nutrients. These tissues also have roles in excretion. The glandular epithelium helps remove waste through the kidneys in the form of urine and through the skin in the form of sweat. Other epithelium removes foreign particles that enter the lungs. And last, they play a role in the transport of gases, liquids, and nutrients. This occurs in thinner epithelial tissue with cells that contain a selectively semi-permeable membrane to allow such substances to diffuse right through them. Now we will talk about classifying the different types of epithelial tissue. They are mainly classified by their arrangement and their shape. However, there are some exceptions, such as pseudostratified, transitional, and glandular. So the arranged shapes are squamous, which are thin and flattened like a plate, and you can visualize it by looking at the top two pictures shown at the right. There is also cuboidal, which can also be referred to as cubical, which is shaped like a cube, and is represented by the middle picture. And finally, there is columnar, which is very long and not too wide like a pencil, and you can see that shape on the bottom two pictures. The arrangement is determined by the number of layer cells the tissue has. If it has one layer, it is simple. Usually these types are located in places where diffusion and filtration take place. If it has more than one layer, it is stratified since it is composed of multiple layers. It is used primarily in places where damage due to friction may occur. This serves as protective tissues. The bottom and top layers of the epithelial cells are known as the free apical surface and the basal surface. The free apical surfaces are the top layers that face lumens, which are spaces between tubular structures. Even though these surfaces are inside the body, they face externally. So an example would be the intestines. They are organs located inside the body, but they are exposed to the outside of the body through the anal opening. That is why free apical surfaces line the lumen, which would be the particular space between tubular structures like the intestines. Basal surfaces, on the other hand, are on the opposite side of free apical surfaces. It can also be described as the basement membrane. It is a thin, non-living layer between epithelial and connective tissues. Since it is thin, it has a semi-permeable membrane in order to transport and filter substances between the two tissues. For example, epithelial tissues are avascular, meaning they lack blood vessels. Therefore, the connective tissues, which contain plenty of blood vessels, transport their nutrients and other substances to the epithelial tissue through the basement membrane. So now we will identify the characteristics of epithelial tissue. As you just learned, they lack blood vessels. Epithelial cells are usually tightly packed. The structure relates to its protective function. There are hardly any intercellular spaces, and the tight junctions and desmosomes help to create a protective barrier against foreign substances. Many of these tightly packed cells are located in the outer layer of the skin and inner layer of the mouth. It's crucial to have this type of protective structure because it is the first line of defense. Another characteristic is that the cells divide rapidly. This causes a rapid healing process, which is also important to the epithelial tissue protective structure because it can replace any damaged cells efficiently. Many are located in the skin cells and the lining of the stomach and intestines because they are organs that are constantly being damaged and need to be repaired quickly.
Simple squamous cells contain a single layer of tissue that are flattened and squished together. They kind of look like sunny-side-up eggs. Because this tissue is so thin, it is a common site for diffusion. It is also very, very delicate. Simple squamous cells line the air sacs in the lungs, the alveoli, the inside of blood and lymph vessels. It also forms the walls of capillaries. It also covers the membranes that line body cavities. In the picture, as you can see, the cells are squished together and flattened.
Simple cuboidal epithelium. Simple cuboidal epithelium can be either a cubical or a rough square. The nuclei of this type of cell are spherical. Spheres are like, triangles inside the circles, so, yeah. They're often found in the glands, like, little tubules in the kidneys. Also known as the renal tubules. Glands with ducts, such as the kidneys, the gallbladder, etc., most often contain this type of cell. A simple cuboidal epithelium. Another type is the germinal epithelium, which forms your gametes, sperm and eggs. These cells, along with all the other types of cuboidal epithelia, are equal in width and height. Surface anatomy. Only surface cells of cuboidal epithelium have a boxy shape. If they are stratified, the deeper layers have a boxy shape as well. There are two different types of cuboidal epithelial cells, active and passive cells. Active cells have a pumping function. These pump materials into the duct's lumen and out of it. Passive cells are called passive because they lack this function. They're stationary and just there. The type of cell, active versus passive, depends on duct location. What's also necessary are certain types of specialized cells. If they aren't present, only passive cuboidal epithelium found. Large ducts will have a different form called stratified cuboidal epithelium, and the difference between which will be explained later. Now, simple columnar epithelium. The cells have multiple layers of the columns. Nuclei are elongated along with the rest of the cell, and nucleus is most often located near the center of the cell. So it's cell, bit of cell, nucleus in the middle, bit of cell. It's kind of like the middle of the little stripy thingies on the column. These cells are also found in lining your stomach and intestines. Some of these also contain the subtle sensory receptors, including those in the nose, ears, and taste buds. That helps you, they help you hear, smell, hear, and taste, respectively. Another variation is the goblet cell, which is found between the columnar epithelial cells and the duodenum. The main function is to secrete mucus, which, keeps the cells smooth, kind of like, it's just there to be like lubricant, if you know what I mean. The cells are rectangular, which just means they're taller than they are wide. There are several different types of columnar cells, which range from a low columnar cell, which is like a short, somewhat fat column, to a tall simple columnar, which is tall and skinny. Anatomy of the simple columnar epithelial cell is kind of simple. The outer layer of it has a brush border. This brush border is used to help transport materials. These materials, their whole anatomy thingy is made of microvilli, like little brushes that project out of the cytoplasm. These brushes help to move things along, transport materials, and basically they're just there to be movers.
Pseudostratified columnar epithelium has a special arrangement. Don't be confused by its name because it's not stratified. It's really simple. If you break up the word pseudostratified, pseudo means false in Latin and stratified means layers in Latin. So pseudostratified really means false layers. So it would make more sense if I explain the structure. Its arrangement is simple because although all of the cells don't reach the apical surface, they all touch the basement membrane to form one layer. However, the location of the nuclei in each cell may throw somebody off. The nuclei are located at different layers on the elongated shape, making it seem like there are multiple layers of cells as well. The nuclei may mislead some people into thinking it's stratified. Thus, that's how it gets its name to be false layers. The disorganized, messy look of the tissue can relate to its function. Many of these tissues are found in the respiratory tract. Thus, the tissues can adjust to the movement of the lungs while breathing is constantly occurring. The lungs are constantly moving, so it's okay for the tissues to look a little disorganized. The main function of pseudostratified columnar epithelium is to serve as a protective layer. Many of these tissues contain goblet cells which secrete mucus. Mucus is thick and sticky in order to trap foreign particles that try to enter the nasal cavity or respiratory tract. Many of these tissues in the lungs are also ciliated, meaning they contain a hair-like structure called cilia. Cilia moves mucus and brushes particles away towards the outside of the body, like a broom. Think of your nose as an example. The mucus in your nose helps to trap foreign particles that might enter your nostrils. Meanwhile, the hair in your nose tries to brush these particles out. They act as filters, just as goblet cells secreting mucus and cilia do in your respiratory tract. As you know, pseudostratified columnar epithelium can be found in your respiratory tract, which may include your lungs, trachea, bronchi, and nasal cavity. If you look at the picture to the upper right, you can see the tissue in your trachea. Notice how they contain cilia coming out of the apical surface. This type of epithelium can also be found in structures of the male reproductive tract, such as the efferent ductules, epididymis, and vas deferens. Many of these structures are tubular, so if you look to the picture on the bottom right, you will notice a lumen. This is a picture of the vas deferens. Notice how there are no cilia in this type of pseudostratified columnar epithelium.
Stratified squamous cells contain many layers. As you near the surface of the cell, it appears flatter. This flatness is due to the aging of cells. As you get deeper, the cells become cuboidal or columnar. The outermost layer is the skin. As cells are pushed to the surface, they gain the protein keratin. They then harden and die. This is a process called keratinization. The keratin produces a protective covering that prevents microorganisms and chemicals to enter the cell. It does not allow water to escape into underlying tissues. The stratified squamous cells line the oral cavity, esophagus, vagina, and anal cavity. The tissue here is not keratinized. Instead, it remains soft and moist. In this picture, you can see that the layer closest to the surface is flatter. As you go deeper into the tissue, the cells are more compact.